The scream of the rusted pulley woke Connor Lansing from a dream of his dead wife, and he knew before he even opened his eyes that something had gone wrong with the well again. He sat up in bed, listening to the silence that followed, wondering if he had imagined it. The farmhouse creaked around him the way old houses do, settling into the cool spring night. He had been here 6 months now, carving out a life on the frontier where land was cheap and questions were few. The war had ended 3 years ago, but the memories had not, and he had needed somewhere far from cities and crowds and the pitying looks of people who knew what he had lost. The sound came again. Not the pulley this time, but footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps crossing the packed earth of his yard. Connor swung his legs out of bed and reached for the knife he kept on the bedside table. It was not much of a weapon, but he had learned during the war that any blade was better than none. He moved to the window and peered through the gap in the shutters. The moon was 3/4 full, bright enough to cast shadows across his small homestead. He could see the vegetable garden he had planted last month, the chicken coop with its wire fence, the small barn where his 2 goats slept. And there, standing at the stone well in the center of the yard, was a figure, his breath caught. She was tall, taller than any woman he had ever seen, with broad shoulders and a muscular build that even the darkness could not disguise. But it was the color of her skin that made his heart pound. Green. Unmistakably green, even in the moonlight, an orc. Connor's hand tightened on the knife. He had seen orcs during the war, though always at a distance. They had fought on both sides, mercenaries mostly, caring little for human politics. The stories about them varied wildly. Some said they were savage killers who ate human flesh. Others claimed they were simply another people trying to survive in a world that feared them. He had never been close enough to find out which was true. The orc woman stood perfectly still at the well, her hands resting on the stone rim. She was not drawing water. She was not moving at all, just standing there as if waiting for something. Connor made a decision. He dressed quickly, pulling on his worn trousers and shirt, and walked to the front door. He kept the knife in his hand but held it low, out of immediate sight. The door hinged creaked as he opened it, and the orc woman's head snapped toward him. Even from 20 feet away, he could see her eyes. They were large and dark, with a faint luminescence that reminded him of a cat's eyes catching lamplight. She did not move away from the well. Did not reach for a weapon. She just watched him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. "The well is on my property," Connor said, keeping his voice steady. "If you are here to steal, you will find I have little worth taking." The orc woman's mouth opened slightly, revealing the tips of small tusks. "I am not here to steal," she said. Her voice was deeper than a human woman's, with a rough quality that suggested she did not speak often. "I am thirsty." Connor stared at her. Of all the things he had expected, a simple statement of need had not been among them. "The creek is a 1/4 mile that way," he said, gesturing east. "Plenty of water there. I know where the creek is." The orc woman shifted her weight, and Connor saw that she was favoring her left leg. "But I am very thirsty, and your well is here." There was something in her voice, not threat, not demand, something else, something that sounded almost like desperation. Connor took a step forward, then another. The orc woman tensed but did not move away. As he got closer, he could see her more clearly. She wore clothes that had once been well made but were now torn and stained with dirt and something that might have been blood. Her dark hair was pulled back in a thick braid that hung past her shoulders. And her face, despite the alien features, the slightly flattened nose, the pronounced brow, the small tusks that jutted up from her lower jaw, held an expression he recognized: fear. "When did you last drink?" Connor asked. The orc woman hesitated. 2 days. 2 days." Connor lowered the knife slightly. "And you have been walking." Yes. From where? Another hesitation. From the north, from the mountains. That was a long way. A very long way, especially without water. Connor made another decision, one that would probably seem foolish in the morning light. He walked to the well, cranked the pulley until the bucket emerged and lifted it out. The water inside was clear and cold. He set it on the stone rim between them. Drink. The orc woman looked at him with those luminous eyes, and for a moment he thought she might refuse out of pride. Then she grabbed the bucket with both hands and drank, not in small sips but in great gulping swallows that made her throat work. Water spilled down her chin and neck, soaking the collar of her torn shirt. She drank until the bucket was empty, then set it down with shaking hands. "Thank you," she said, and her voice was rougher now, thick with emotion. "What is your name?" Connor asked. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "Grasha. I am Connor Lansing. This is my farm." "I know." Grasha looked around the yard, taking in the small house, the garden, the barn. "I've been watching for 3 days, making sure you lived alone, making sure you were not." She trailed off. "Not what?" "Not one of the hunters." The word sent a chill down Connor's spine. He had heard rumors in the town, 15 miles south, rumors of men who hunted orcs for sport or bounty. Men who did not care whether their prey was armed or dangerous, man or woman, adult or child. "I am a farmer," Connor said quietly. "Nothing more." Grasha nodded slowly. Then her leg buckled. Connor moved without thinking, dropping the knife and catching her before she hit the ground. She was heavy, far heavier than a human woman of the same size, all dense muscle and solid bone. He staggered under her weight but managed to keep them both upright. "What happened?" he demanded. "Are you hurt?" "I am fine," Grasha said, but her voice lacked conviction. She tried to pull away from him, but her strength had left her. Connor looked down and saw the dark stain spreading across her left thigh. "Blood. Fresh blood." "You are not fine," he said. "You are bleeding." "It is nothing." "It is clearly something." Connor shifted his grip, taking more of her weight. "Can you walk?" "Yes." She took one step and nearly fell again. Connor cursed under his breath. "Put your arm around my shoulders," he ordered. "We are going inside." "No," Grasha shook her head violently. "No, I should not. I should go." "You can barely stand and you are losing blood. You are not going anywhere. You do not understand." There was panic in her voice now. "If someone finds me here, they will kill you. They will think you are harboring me, helping me." "Are you a criminal?" "No." "Have you hurt anyone who did not deserve it?" Grasha's jaw tightened. "No." "Then I do not care what anyone thinks." Connor started walking toward the house, half carrying her. "Come on, move your feet." She did, though every step seemed to cost her. They made it to the door, through the narrow hallway, and into the small main room that served as both kitchen and living space. Connor guided her to the wooden chair by the table and lowered her into it. She slumped forward immediately, her breathing labored. He lit 2 lamps, filling the room with warm yellow light, then went to the shelf where he kept his medical supplies. They were basic bandages, needle and thread, a bottle of alcohol for sterilizing, but he had learned field medicine during the war, and he knew how to close a wound. When he turned back, Grasha was watching him with those glowing eyes. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Connor set the supplies on the table. "Because you asked for water and I gave it to you. Because you are hurt and I can help. Because I have seen enough death to last several lifetimes, and I would prefer not to add to it if I can avoid doing so. Most humans would not think that way. I am not most humans." He pulled another chair close and sat down. "I need to see the wound." "Can you remove your trousers, or do I need to cut them?" Grasha flushed, the green of her skin darkening slightly. "I can manage." She stood with difficulty and worked the buttons of her trousers. Connor looked away, giving her what privacy he could until she sat back down. The wound on her left thigh was worse than he had feared. A long gash, deep enough to expose muscle with ragged edges that suggested it had been made by something crude and sharp. "What did this?" Connor asked, reaching for the alcohol. A trap, steel jaws hidden under leaves. "I walked right into it. When, this morning, I got free, but—" She gestured at the wound. Connor nodded. "This is going to hurt." "I know." He poured alcohol over the wound. Grasha's entire body went rigid and a low growl escaped her throat, but she did not cry out. Connor worked quickly, cleaning away the dried blood and dirt, checking for debris in the wound. Finding none, he threaded the needle. "How many stitches have you had before?" he asked. "Enough." He began to sew. Grasha sat perfectly still, her hands gripping the sides of the chair hard enough to make the wood creak. Connor tried to work gently, but there was no way to make stitches pleasant. He closed the wound with small, neat stitches, the way the surgeon in his company had taught him. When he finished, he wrapped clean bandages around her thigh and tied them securely. "Done," he said, sitting back. "You should rest. The bleeding has stopped, but that wound needs time to heal." Grasha looked down at the bandages, then up at him. "I do not understand you, Connor Lansing." "What is there to understand? You are human. I am orc. We are not meant to help each other." Connor began putting away the medical supplies. "Who decided that?" "Everyone. Your people. My people. The world. The world is wrong about a great many things." He stood and went to the small stove in the corner. "Are you hungry?" Grasha hesitated. "Yes." "Then I will make food. It is late, but I have bread and cheese, some dried meat. It is not much, but it will fill your stomach." He moved around the kitchen, gathering food, aware of her eyes on him the entire time. When he set the plate in front of her, she stared at it as if it might vanish. "Eat," Connor said gently. She did, with the same desperate intensity she had shown when drinking. Connor sat across from her and watched. He should have been afraid. Should have been questioning his own sanity for bringing an orc into his home. But all he felt was a strange sense of rightness, as if this was exactly what he was supposed to be doing at this moment. When Grasha finished eating, she looked at him with something close to wonder. "Thank you," she said. "For the water, for the food, for the stitches. Thank you. You are welcome. I will leave in the morning. Before first light, no one will know I was here." Connor shook his head. "You cannot walk on that leg, not yet. You will tear the stitches and the wound will open again. Then what do you suggest? Stay for a few days, until you heal." "That is madness, perhaps." Connor smiled slightly. "But I seem to be full of madness tonight." Grasha stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, slowly. "A few days, no more. Agreed." Connor stood and gestured to the narrow staircase that led to the sleeping loft. "There is a bed upstairs. You can use it. I will sleep down here." "No, I cannot take your bed. I insist." They argued about it for several minutes, but Connor was stubborn and Grasha was exhausted. Finally, she climbed the stairs, moving carefully on her injured leg. Connor heard the creak of the bed frame as she lay down, then silence. He banked the fire in the stove and stretched out on the floor by the table, using his coat as a pillow. It was uncomfortable, but he had slept in worse places. As he closed his eyes, he wondered what he had gotten himself into. Whatever it was, he would face it in the morning. Connor woke to the smell of cooking porridge and sat up so fast he nearly hit his head on the table leg. He had overslept, something he never did. The sun was already high enough to send light streaming through the windows, and Grasha was standing at his stove stirring a pot. "You should be resting," Connor said, getting to his feet. Grasha glanced over her shoulder. "I rested. Now I am making breakfast. You gave me food last night. It is only fair that I return the favor. You are injured." "I am always injured. It does not stop me from functioning." She ladled porridge into 2 bowls and set them on the table. "Sit," Eat. Connor sat, more out of surprise than obedience. He took a bite of the porridge and blinked. It was good, better than good. She had found the honey he kept in the cupboard and added just enough to sweeten it without making it cloying. "You are a good cook," he said. Grasha sat down across from him, moving carefully to avoid jarring her leg. "My mother taught me." She said that a person who could not cook was a person who could not survive. Your mother was wise. Yes, she was. Grasha's expression darkened. She is dead now. The hunters came 2 years ago. She fought to give me time to run. Connor set down his spoon. I am sorry. Why? You did not kill her. No. But I am sorry nonetheless. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Connor found himself studying her in the morning light. Her skin was a deep forest green, darker on her arms and face where the sun had touched it. Her tusks were small and smooth, curving up from her lower jaw. Her ears came to delicate points that somehow seemed at odds with her strong features. She was beautiful, he realized. Strange and alien, but beautiful. You are staring, Grasha said without looking up. I apologize. I have never been this close to an orc before. And what do you think? I think you look nothing like the stories say. What do the stories say? That orcs are monsters, beasts in human shape with no thoughts beyond violence and hunger. Grasha's laugh was bitter. And what do the orc stories say about humans? I do not know. What do they say? That humans are treacherous, that they smile while sharpening their knives, that they take and take and take until there is nothing left to take. She looked at him directly. But you do not seem treacherous, Connor Lansing. I try not to be. After breakfast, Connor insisted on checking her wound. The bandages had stayed clean overnight with no sign of fresh bleeding. The stitches held firm. He changed the dressing and helped her back to the chair. You are a good healer, Grasha said. I had practiced during the war, too much practice. You fought for 3 years. And now you are here in the middle of nowhere growing vegetables and raising goats. Yes. Why? Connor began putting away the medical supplies. Because the war took everything from me, my wife, my home, my belief that the world made sense. I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere I could try to remember who I was before all the killing. Grasha was quiet for a moment. Did you kill orcs during the war? No. The orcs in my region fought for our side. I killed men, hundreds of men. Do you regret it? Every day. She nodded slowly as if that answer satisfied her. What was your wife's name, Margaret? We called her Maggie. Connor smiled, though it hurt. She died of fever the winter before the war ended. I was away at the front. I did not even know she was sick until she had been dead for 2 weeks. That is a hard thing. Yes. Do you have children? No, we tried, but... He shrugged. It was not meant to be. Grasha reached out and touched his hand just briefly. Her skin was warm and rough with calluses. I am sorry, Connor Lansing, for your wife, for your pain. Thank you. The days fell into a pattern. Connor would wake early, check on Grasha's wound, and then go about his chores. The garden needed weeding. The goats needed milking. The chicken coop needed cleaning. All the small, endless tasks that came with running a farm. Grasha, despite her injury, insisted on helping. She could not do heavy work, but she could sit and shell beans or mend the torn sections of his chicken wire or churn butter. She worked with a quiet intensity, rarely speaking unless spoken to, but her presence filled the house in a way Connor had not expected. On the 3rd day, Connor came in from the garden to find her standing at the window, looking out at the road. Something wrong? He asked. No, I am simply being cautious. She glanced at him. How often do people come by? Not often. I get a traveling merchant maybe once a month. A neighbor will stop by occasionally, though most live several miles away. Good. Connor washed his hands in the basin by the door. Are you worried about the hunters always? How many are there? I do not know. 8, 10. They move in groups, usually 2 or 3 at a time. They have dogs, good dogs trained to follow orc scent. Where are they now? I lost them in the mountains, but they are persistent. They will pick up my trail eventually. Grasha turned from the window. That is why I must leave soon, before they find me here. Your leg is not healed. It is healed enough. It is not. Connor crossed to her and looked at her directly. You can barely walk without limping. If you try to run on that leg, you will tear the stitches and possibly make the wound worse. Give it another week. A week is too long. Then 5 more days, please. Grasha studied his face. Why do you care what happens to me? It was a fair question. Connor was not sure he knew the answer himself. Because you knocked on my well at midnight and asked for water, he said finally. And because I think you deserve better than to be hunted like an animal. Something shifted in Grasha's expression. Her shoulders dropped slightly, and the tension in her jaw eased. 5 more days, she said quietly. Then I must go. 5 more days. That evening, Connor made a stew with vegetables from the garden and a bit of salted pork. They ate by lamplight, and for the first time, Grasha asked him questions. About his life before the war. About his family. About how he had ended up on this remote farm. He answered honestly, finding it surprisingly easy to talk to her. She listened with complete attention, never interrupting, only asking occasional questions that showed she was truly interested in what he was saying. You miss your old life, she said when he finished. Parts of it. I miss Maggie. I miss feeling like I belong somewhere. Connor leaned back in his chair. But I do not miss the city. I do not miss the noise and the crowds and the constant reminders of everything I lost. So you came here to hide. I came here to heal. There is a difference. Grasha nodded slowly. I understand that. I have been hiding and trying to heal for 2 years now. It is not easy. No, it is not. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Grasha spoke again, her voice softer than Connor had heard it before. I had a mate, she said. Before the hunters came, his name was Dragak. He was strong and kind, and he made me laugh. She stared at her hands. The hunters killed him. They killed him, and they left his body in the road as a warning to other orcs. Connor felt his chest tighten. I am so sorry. I tried to fight them. I wanted to die with him. But Dragak had always been faster than me, and he pushed me away, told me to run. So I ran. Tears welled in her eyes, catching the lamplight. I ran, and I left him there, and I have been running ever since. Without thinking, Connor reached across the table and took her hand. She did not pull away. You did what he wanted, Connor said gently. You honored him by surviving. It does not feel like honor, it feels like cowardice. It is not. Believe me, I have seen cowardice. What you did was brave. Grasha looked at him with those luminous eyes, and for a moment Connor forgot how to breathe. There was something in her gaze, something vulnerable and raw and achingly human. Thank you, she whispered, for saying that, for listening. Always. On the 5th day, Connor went to town. He had put it off as long as he could, but he needed supplies. Flour, sugar, nails, a new hinge for the barn door, things he could not make or grow himself. He left early in the morning, telling Grasha he would be back by evening. Stay inside, he said. Do not go outside unless you absolutely must. If anyone comes by, hide in the loft. Grasha nodded. She looked worried, though she tried to hide it. The ride to town took 3 hours. Connor's horse, a patient mare named Daisy, plodded along at her usual steady pace. The road was empty, winding through forests and fields that showed the first green flush of spring. The town was small, barely more than a cluster of buildings around a central square. Connor tied Daisy to the rail outside the general store and went inside. The owner, a thin man named Horace, greeted him with a nod. Connor, been a while. I try to stay stocked up, Smart. What can I get you? Connor rattled off his list and watched as Horace gathered the items. The store was empty except for the two of them, but Connor could hear voices from the tavern next door. Loud voices, the kind that came with midday drinking. Busy today? Connor asked. Not especially. Horace wrapped the nails in paper. Got a few men passing through. Hunters, they say. Connor's blood went cold. Hunters? Yeah, looking for some orc woman. Apparently she killed a man up north and has been on the run for weeks. Horace leaned in conspiratorially. They have got a bounty on her. 50 gold pieces, dead or alive. 50 pieces. Connor kept his voice neutral. That is a lot of money. It is. They say she is dangerous, big even for an orc woman, green skin and black hair, got some kind of scar on her left arm. Horace shook his head. Can you imagine? An orc woman out here roaming around makes a man nervous. Connor did not remember seeing a scar on Grasha's arm, but he did not mention it. Have they had any luck finding her? Not yet, but they are checking all the farms and homesteads in the area. They will probably make it out to your place in a day or two. I see. Connor paid for his supplies and loaded them into Daisy's saddlebags. His hands were shaking slightly, but he forced them to be steady. Thank you, Horace. Anytime, and Connor, you be careful out there. If you see anything strange, you come tell us, all right, of course. Connor rode back faster than he had come, pushing Daisy as hard as he dared. His mind raced. 50 gold pieces. Men with dogs. A story about a murdered man that he did not believe for a second. He reached the farm just as the sun was setting. Grasha met him at the door, her face tight with tension. What happened? She asked immediately. Connor dismounted and began unloading the saddlebags. The hunters are in town. They are looking for you. They have a story about you killing a man. I did not kill anyone. I know. Connor carried the supplies inside and set them on the table. But they are telling everyone you did. They have a bounty on you, 50 gold pieces. Grasha went very still. 50 pieces. Yes. That is a fortune. Any farmer or merchant would turn me in for that kind of money. Connor looked at her directly. I am a farmer, and I am not turning you in. Connor, you do not understand. 50 gold pieces could change your life. You could buy more land, better animals. You could rebuild everything you lost. I do not want their blood money. You are a fool, probably. Connor pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. But I am a fool who gave his word that you could stay until you were healed, and I keep my word. Grasha stared at him for a long moment. Then she crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt in front of him, taking his hands in hers. Why? She asked, and there were tears in her eyes again. Why are you doing this for me? Connor looked at her upturned face, at the green skin and the dark eyes and the small tusks, and realized he knew the answer. Because somewhere along the way, he said quietly, you stopped being a stranger at my well. You became Grasha, a person I care about. A person I do not want to see hurt, Connor. I know it is foolish. I know we barely know each other. But I have spent 2 years alone in this house, and these past 5 days with you here have been the first time I have felt alive since Maggie died. I am not ready for that to end. Grasha closed her eyes and tears spilled down her cheeks. I feel the same, she whispered. I did not want to. I tried not to, but I do. Connor reached out and gently wiped the tears from her face. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, and she leaned into his touch like a cat seeking warmth. We need to make a plan, he said. The hunters will be here soon. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after. We need to be ready. Grasha nodded and pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. What do you suggest? We make it look like you were never here. Clean everything. Hide any trace of your presence. When they come, I will tell them I have seen nothing. If they want to search the farm, I will let them. But you will be hidden somewhere they will not think to look. Where? Connor thought for a moment. The root cellar. It is under the kitchen floor, hidden beneath a rug. Cold and dark, but safe. If you hide there, they will not find you. And if they do, then I will deal with it. Connor, they will kill you if they think you are helping me. I know. Then why risk it? He smiled slightly. Because I am a fool who keeps his word. Remember, they spent the rest of the evening preparing. Connor showed Grasha the root cellar, a small space carved into the earth beneath the house. It smelled of damp soil and old potatoes, but it was secure. He brought down blankets and a water skin, along with some food in case she needed to stay hidden for several hours. Then they cleaned. Every surface, every corner, removing any sign that Grasha had been there. They took the sheets from the bed in the loft and replaced them with fresh ones. They scrubbed the floor where she had bled. They washed every dish and put everything back exactly as it had been before she arrived. By the time they finished, it was past midnight. Connor and Grasha stood in the kitchen, surveying their work. "It looks good," Grasha said. "Like no one has been here but you." "Good." Connor turned to her. "Tomorrow you should stay in the cellar just to be safe. I will let you know when it is clear." "All right." Neither of them moved. The air between them felt thick with unspoken words. "Grasha," Connor said finally. "When this is over, when the hunters move on, will you stay?" She looked at him in surprise. "Stay here with me on the farm." He took a breath. "I know it is not much, a small house and a few animals, but it is peaceful and it is yours if you want it. Connor, I am orc, you are human. The world will not accept us. I do not care about the world, I care about you." Grasha's eyes searched his face. "Are you certain, truly certain? Because if I stay, there is no going back. Your neighbors will know, the town will know, they will shun you or worse." "Then let them." Connor took her hands again. "I have lived alone long enough, I have mourned long enough. I want to live again, Grasha, and I want to live with you." She pulled him close, wrapping her strong arms around him. Connor held her, feeling the warmth of her body, the steady beat of her heart. When she spoke, her voice was muffled against his shoulder. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will stay." They held each other for a long time, there in the kitchen lit by a single lamp, and when they finally pulled apart, Connor leaned in and kissed her. It was tentative at first, both of them uncertain. But Grasha kissed him back with a fierce tenderness that made his heart soar. Her tusks brushed against his face, strange but not unpleasant. When they broke apart, they were both smiling. "Tomorrow," Connor said. "We face whatever comes tomorrow. Tonight we rest." Grasha nodded. They climbed the stairs to the loft together, and for the first time, Connor did not sleep on the floor. They lay side by side on the narrow bed, Grasha's head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. And despite everything, despite the danger waiting just beyond the horizon, Connor felt at peace. The hunters came just after noon the next day. Connor had been in the garden, pulling weeds, when he heard the sound of horses. 4 men, all mounted on good horses with saddlebags and weapons. They rode into his yard with the easy confidence of people who were used to getting what they wanted. Grasha was already in the root cellar, hidden beneath the kitchen rug. Connor had checked on her an hour earlier, making sure she had everything she needed. Now he stood and walked toward the riders, wiping dirt from his hands. "Good afternoon," Connor said, keeping his voice pleasant. "Can I help you?" The lead rider, a heavy-set man with a graying beard, looked down at him. "You the owner of this place?" "I am, Connor Lansing." "I am Garrett. These are my associates." He gestured to the other 3 men. "We are looking for someone, an orc woman. Green skin, black hair, about this tall." He held his hand up to indicate Grasha's height. "You seen anyone like that around here?" Connor shook his head. "No, I have not seen any orcs. Are you sure she came this way? We tracked her to the creek about a mile east of here. Lost the scent after that, but we know she is in this area." Garrett leaned forward in his saddle. "Mind if we take a look around?" "Not at all. though I am not sure what you expect to find." Garrett dismounted, and the other men followed. They spread out across the yard, checking the barn, the chicken coop, the garden. One of them had a dog, a lean hound that sniffed eagerly at the ground. Connor stood still, his heart pounding. If the dog picked up Grasha's scent, if it led them to the house, to the cellar. But the dog seemed confused. It circled the yard twice, whining, then sat down and scratched behind its ear. Garrett frowned. "What is wrong with him?" he asked the man holding the leash. "Not sure. He is usually good at this." They checked the barn next, poking through the straw and the feed bins. Connor followed at a distance, trying to look curious but not worried. One of the men climbed into the loft and kicked around in the hay. "Nothing here," he called down. "Check the house," Garrett ordered. Connor's stomach dropped, but he forced himself to nod. "Of course. Come in." He led them inside. The four men trooped through his small home, opening cupboards, looking under the bed, checking the loft. The dog followed, still sniffing but showing no real interest. Connor held his breath when Garrett walked over the rug that hid the cellar entrance. But the hunter did not stop, did not kneel, did not seem to notice anything unusual. After 10 minutes, Garrett grunted. "All right, she is not here." "Told you," Connor said. "Yeah." Garrett gave him a long look. "You sure you have not seen anything? Footprints, signs of a camp, anything at all?" "Nothing. I keep to myself out here, do not see much of anyone." "All right." Garrett signaled to his men and they filed back outside. He paused at the door and turned. "If you do see her, you let us know. There is a bounty, 50 gold pieces. I will keep that in mind." The hunters mounted their horses and rode off, heading south. Connor watched them until they disappeared over the hill. Then he went back inside, locked the door, and pulled up the rug. Grasha looked up at him from the darkness of the cellar, her eyes wide. "They are gone," Connor said, reaching down to help her out. "They searched the whole place and found nothing." Grasha climbed out and immediately wrapped her arms around him, shaking. "I heard everything," she said. "I heard them walking over me. I thought for certain they would find me. But they did not." Connor held her tight. "You are safe." They stood there for a long time, just holding each other. When Grasha finally pulled back, her face was wet with tears. "I cannot keep living like this," she said. "Always hiding, always afraid. It is no way to live, I know. Connor, I need to do something. I need to end this." "What do you mean?" Grasha took a breath. "The hunter, Garrett. He and his men are the ones who killed Dragak. I recognized his voice. I will never forget it." Connor felt a chill. "Are you sure?" "Yes. He is the leader. The others follow him." She looked at Connor with fierce determination. "If I can stop him, the others might give up, or at least think twice before coming after me again." "Grasha, you cannot fight 4 armed men alone." "I am not alone. I have you. I am a farmer, not a fighter. You were a soldier." "That was different." "Was it?" Grasha took his hands. "Connor, I am not asking you to kill anyone. I am asking you to help me make a stand, to show them that I am not prey, that I am a person who will fight back." Connor looked at her, at the determination in her eyes, and knew he could not say no. She was right. Running would solve nothing. Sooner or later the hunters would find her. Better to face them on their own terms. "All right," he said quietly. "We make a plan, but we do it smart. We do not take unnecessary risks." Grasha smiled, fierce and wild. "Agreed." They spent the afternoon preparing. Connor had 3 weapons in the house: a hunting rifle, an old sword from his army days, and a bow with a quiver of arrows. He gave Grasha the sword, which she handled with easy familiarity, and kept the rifle for himself. The bow would be their backup. "They will camp somewhere nearby," Grasha said. "Probably by the creek. That is where the water is." "How do we find them without them finding us first?" "We follow at a distance. Wait until dark, then we approach." "And then what?" Grasha's smile turned grim. Then we talk, and if talking does not work, we fight." They waited until the sun set, then set out on foot. Grasha's leg had healed enough that she could walk without limping, though Connor knew it must still hurt. They moved quietly through the forest, following the road at a distance. It took an hour, but they found the hunters' camp just as Grasha had predicted. 4 men around a small fire, their horses tied to a nearby tree. The dog lay at Garrett's feet, dozing. Connor and Grasha crouched in the underbrush, watching. "What is the plan?" Connor whispered. "I go in. You stay here with the rifle. If they try to kill me, you shoot." "That is a terrible plan." "Do you have a better one?" Connor thought for a moment. "We circle around, come in from 2 sides. That way they cannot surround either of us." Grasha nodded slowly. "All right, you take the left. Give me 2 minutes, then move in." Before Connor could respond, she leaned in and kissed him, quick and fierce and full of promise. "Be careful," she whispered. "You too." Grasha melted into the darkness, silent as a shadow. Connor waited, counting the seconds in his head. When 2 minutes had passed, he began to move, circling wide to the left. He kept the rifle ready, his finger near the trigger but not on it. Grasha stepped into the firelight like a ghost materializing from thin air. The hunters reacted instantly. All 4 jumped to their feet, hands going to their weapons. The dog barked once, then fell silent when Garrett kicked it. "Well, well," Garrett said, drawing a long knife. "Look what we have here. Saved us the trouble of hunting you down." "Garrett," Grasha said, and her voice was cold as winter. "I remember you. Do you now? You killed my mate. 2 years ago on the road north of Blackstone. You left his body in the dirt and laughed while you did it." Garrett's smile widened. "Oh, that one. Yeah, I remember. Big fellow, fought hard, died hard." He took a step forward. "You are going to die the same way." "I do not think so." Connor stepped out of the shadows on the opposite side of the camp, the rifle leveled at Garrett's chest. "Nobody moves," Connor said quietly. The hunters froze. Garrett slowly turned his head to look at Connor. "Well," he said, "the farmer is braver than he looks." "The farmer is also a veteran with a rifle," Connor replied, "and I am an excellent shot. So unless you want a hole in your chest, you will drop your weapons, all of you." "You would not dare," one of the other hunters said. Connor shifted his aim and fired. The bullet whizzed past the man's ear, missing by inches. The crack of the rifle echoed through the forest. "The next one does not miss," Connor said, already reloading. "Weapons, down, now." The hunters exchanged glances. Then, slowly, they dropped their knives and swords to the ground. "Good," Grasha said. She walked forward, picking up Garrett's knife. "Now we are going to talk." Garrett spat at her feet. "We do not talk to animals." Grasha's hand moved so fast Connor almost missed it. She grabbed Garrett by the collar and lifted him off his feet, holding him at arm's length. The other hunters started forward, but Connor shifted the rifle and they stopped. "You are going to listen," Grasha said, her voice low and dangerous. "I did not kill your man in the north. I have never killed a human who was not trying to kill me first. The story you are spreading is a lie." "Prove it," Garrett choked out. "I cannot. But I can tell you this. If you keep hunting me, if you keep spreading lies about me, I will make your life very difficult. I know where you camp. I know your routes. I can disappear for months, then come back when you least expect it. You will never be safe. You are bluffing." "Am I?" Grasha set him down but kept hold of his collar. "Or maybe I am tired of running. Maybe I am ready to make a stand. To show people like you that orcs are not animals to be hunted. We are people, and we deserve to live in peace." Garrett stared at her, and for the first time, Connor saw fear in the man's eyes. "What do you want?" Garrett asked. "I want you to leave," Grasha said. "Go back to wherever you came from. Tell whoever hired you that the orc woman is dead or gone. I do not care, just leave me alone. And if we do not, then Connor and I will make sure every farm, Every town, every settlement in this region knows what you really are. Cowards who hunt defenseless travelers for money. Murderers who leave bodies in the road. Do you think people will hire you after that?" The other hunters shifted uncomfortably. Connor could see the calculation in their eyes. The bounty was good, but their reputation was worth more. Garrett must have seen it too. He nodded slowly. "Fine," he said. "We will leave, but you better hope I never see you again. The feeling is mutual." Grasha released him and stepped back. Connor kept the rifle trained on them as they gathered their weapons and mounted their horses. Garrett was the last to leave. He stared at Grasha, then at Connor. "You are making a mistake, farmer," he said. "Protecting her." "Maybe," Connor replied. "But it is my mistake to make." The hunters rode off into the darkness. Connor and Grasha stood by the dying fire, waiting until the sound of hooves faded completely. Then Grasha turned to Connor and pulled him into a fierce embrace. "We did it," she said. "We actually did it. We did." Connor held her tight, feeling the adrenaline start to fade. "But we need to be careful. Garrett might not keep his word." "I know, but we bought time, and time is what we need." They walked back to the farm under the stars, hand in hand. When they reached the house, Grasha stopped and looked at Connor. "Thank you," she said, "for standing with me, for risking everything." "I would do it again," Connor said simply. "Every time." She kissed him then, long and deep, and Connor felt like his heart might burst. When they finally pulled apart, Grasha was smiling. "Come on," she said. "Let us go home." Home. The word settled over Connor like a warm blanket. Yes, he thought. Home. The weeks that followed were the happiest Connor had known in years. Grasha's leg healed completely, and she threw herself into farm work with an energy that amazed him. She was stronger than any human, able to lift sacks of grain that would have required 2 men. She had a way with the animals, too. The goats, which had always been skittish with Connor, followed her around like puppies. They fell into an easy rhythm. Connor would work the fields while Grasha tended the animals and the garden. They would eat lunch together in the shade of the old oak tree by the well. Evenings were spent cooking dinner, talking, and sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. And at night, they would lie together in the narrow bed, holding each other until sleep came. Connor had not forgotten the hunters. He kept his rifle loaded and his senses sharp. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into a month, he began to relax. No one came to the farm. No one asked questions in town when he went for supplies. It seemed, against all odds, that Grasha was safe. One evening in late spring, Connor was repairing the fence around the vegetable garden when Grasha came out of the house with 2 mugs of cold water. "You have been out here for hours," she said, handing him one. "Take a break." Connor drank gratefully and wiped sweat from his forehead. "I am almost done, just a few more posts." Grasha looked at the fence, then at the garden beyond. The plants were thriving, their leaves a deep, healthy green. "We are going to have a good harvest this year. We are." Connor set down his mug and took her hand. "Grasha, I have been thinking." "About what?" "About us. About the future." She tilted her head, studying him. "What about it?" Connor took a breath. This was harder than he had expected. "I know we have only been together a short time. I know there are still dangers, but I need to ask you something." "All right." "Will you marry me?" Grasha went very still. "Marry you?" "Yes. I know it is complicated. I know no church will agree to it, and most people will think we are crazy. But I do not care. I want you to be my wife. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Tears welled in Grasha's eyes. "Connor, are you certain? Once we do this, there is truly no going back." "I am certain. I have never been more certain of anything." She laughed, a sound that was half sob, half joy. "Then yes. Yes, I will marry you." Connor pulled her close and kissed her, not caring that he was covered in dirt and sweat. When they broke apart, both of them were grinning like fools. How do we do this? Grasha asked. If no church will marry us, we do it ourselves. Connor thought for a moment. There is an old tradition. A hand fasting. Two people bind their hands together and make vows to each other, no priest necessary. Whenever you want. Grasha's smile widened. Tomorrow, under the oak tree by the well, where we first met. Perfect. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Grasha picked flowers from the garden and wove them into a crown. Connor cleaned his best shirt and trousers, the ones he had not worn since moving to the farm. They cooked a special dinner, using the last of the preserved meat and vegetables from winter. As the sun set, they sat together on the porch, watching the sky turn orange and pink. Are you nervous? Grasha asked. A little, Connor admitted. Are you? Yes, but also excited, me too. The next day dawned clear and warm. Connor woke early and dressed carefully, making sure everything was perfect. Grasha wore a simple green dress that she had found among the things Connor's late wife had left behind. It fit her surprisingly well, and the color brought out the richness of her skin. They walked to the oak tree together, hand in hand. Connor had prepared a length of soft cloth for the hand fasting. They stood facing each other, and Connor took Grasha's hands. I do not know the proper words, he said, so I will speak from my heart. Grasha, you came into my life when I needed hope most. You showed me that it is possible to live again after loss, to love again after grief. You are brave and kind and strong, and I am honored to call you mine. I vow to stand by you, to protect you, to cherish you, for as long as I live. Grasha's tears spilled over. Connor, you saved my life, not just at the well, but every day since. You saw me as a person when others saw only a monster. You gave me a home when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I would never feel it again. I vow to be your partner, your friend, your love, for as long as the sun rises. Connor wrapped the cloth around their joined hands, binding them together. Then he leaned forward and kissed her, sealing the vow. I love you, he whispered. I love you too. They stood there for a long moment, hands bound, foreheads pressed together. The world seemed to fade away until there was only the two of them, together under the old oak tree. Finally, they unwrapped the cloth and walked back to the house. Connor cooked breakfast while Grasha made tea, and they ate together at the small table, now husband and wife. What do we do now? Grasha asked. We live, Connor said simply. We work the farm, we build a life, and we face whatever comes together. Together, Grasha repeated, and the word sounded like a prayer. Summer came, and with it, hard work. The garden flourished, producing more vegetables than Connor and Grasha could eat themselves. They took the surplus to town and sold it at the market, earning enough coin to buy a few luxuries. A new dress for Grasha. A good knife for Connor. Honey and sugar and other treats. The first time Connor brought Grasha to town, he had expected trouble, but the people there surprised him. Some stared, yes, some whispered, but no one confronted them, no one called for the guards. Horace at the general store simply nodded at Grasha and asked if she needed anything. Just these, Grasha said, setting a basket of vegetables on the counter. Horace examined them and nodded approvingly. Good quality. I will give you a fair price. They sold to him regularly after that. Word spread, as word does in small towns, that the farmer on the hill had married an orc woman. Some people disapproved. Connor heard the whispers, saw the looks, but others were curious, even friendly. A neighboring farmer, an older woman named Helen, stopped by one day with a basket of apples. Welcome to the area, she said to Grasha. I figured you might like these, got more than I can use. Grasha took the basket with obvious surprise. Thank you, that is very kind. We all need to help each other out here, Helen said. Life on the frontier is hard enough without making enemies of our neighbors. After she left, Grasha looked at Connor with wonder. "I did not expect that." "Neither did I," Connor admitted, "but I am glad." More visitors came over the following weeks. Some brought small gifts. Others just wanted to talk. Slowly, Grasha began to relax around them. She would never be completely comfortable with strangers, Connor knew. The years of running had left their mark, but she was trying, and that was enough. One afternoon in late summer, Connor and Grasha were working in the barn when they heard horses approaching. Connor tensed, his hand instinctively going to the pitchfork he had been using. But when he looked outside, he saw not hunters but a small family. A man, a woman, and 2 children. "Hello," the man called. "We are looking for Connor Lansing." Connor stepped out of the barn. "I am Connor." "My name is Peter. This is my wife, Anne, and our children. We are new to the area. Just bought the old Carter place about 5 miles west." Peter dismounted and held out his hand. "We heard about you and your wife. Heard you might be willing to trade some vegetables for tools. We have got plenty of tools but not much food yet." Connor shook his hand, surprised and pleased. "We can certainly arrange that." They worked out a trade, and Peter's family stayed for lunch. The children, a boy and a girl, were shy at first around Grasha, but when she showed them the baby goats, they warmed up quickly. By the time the family left, the children were laughing and waving goodbye. "That went well," Grasha said as they watched the family ride away. "It did." Connor put his arm around her waist. "Maybe things are changing, maybe. But not everything was easy." One day in early autumn, Connor went to town alone to pick up a package of seeds he had ordered. He was loading them into Daisy's saddlebags when 3 men approached him. One of them was Garrett. Connor's hand went to the knife at his belt, but he did not draw it. He simply stood there, waiting. "Lansing," Garrett said. His voice was cold. "Heard you married that orc." "I did." "That makes you a traitor to your own kind." Connor looked at him calmly. "I married the woman I love. That makes me a husband." One of the other men spat on the ground. "Unnatural is what it is, man lying with an orc." "What I do on my own land is my business," Connor said. "Not yours." Garrett took a step closer. "You made us look like fools, spreading stories about us being cowards and murderers." "I did not spread any stories. If your reputation is suffering, maybe you should examine your own actions." Garrett's hand went to the knife at his belt. Connor tensed, ready to fight. But before anything could happen, Horace stepped out of his store. "Is there a problem here?" the shopkeeper asked loudly. Other people on the street stopped and turned to look. Garrett glanced around, clearly weighing his options. Then he smiled, a cold expression that did not reach his eyes. "No problem," he said. "Just catching up with an old friend." He and his men walked away. Connor let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. "You all right?" Horace asked quietly. "Yes, thank you. Garrett and his men have been causing trouble around here. Most folks do not trust them anymore." Horace handed Connor his package. "You watch yourself, Connor, and watch your wife. Men like that do not forget grudges." Connor nodded and rode home faster than usual. When he arrived, he told Grasha about the encounter. "We should be careful," he said. "Garrett is still angry." Grasha's jaw tightened. "He is a coward. He will not do anything while people are watching. But when they are not, then we will be ready." They took precautions. Connor kept his rifle loaded by the door. They locked the barn at night and made sure the animals were secure. Connor even set up a simple alarm system, strings tied to bells that would ring if anyone approached the house after dark. But as the weeks passed and nothing happened, they began to relax again. Harvest season arrived, and they were too busy to worry much about threats. The garden yielded more than they had hoped. They dried vegetables, preserved fruits, and traded the rest for things they would need for winter. On the first frost of the year, Connor woke to find Grasha standing at the window, looking out at the white-covered fields. "It is beautiful," she said softly. I have never had a home in winter before, never stayed in one place long enough. Connor came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. You have a home now. She leaned back against him. Yes, I do. They spent the winter months in cozy domesticity. Grasha learned to knit, making socks and scarves for both of them. Connor repaired tools and made plans for expanding the farm in spring. They read books by the fire, played simple card games, and talked late into the night about everything and nothing. And they loved each other with a fierce tenderness that grew stronger with each passing day. One evening in the depths of winter, as snow fell outside and the fire crackled in the hearth, Grasha put down her knitting and looked at Connor. I am with child, she said quietly. Connor nearly dropped the book he was reading. What? I am pregnant. About 2 months along, I think. Connor stared at her, his mind reeling. But I did not know if orcs and humans could. Neither did I. Grasha's hand went to her belly. But apparently we can. Are you happy? Connor crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. Happy. I am overjoyed. Grasha, this is wonderful. She hugged him back and he felt her relax against him. I was worried. I did not know how you would react. I love you, Connor said fiercely. And I will love our child. Human, orc, or something in between, it does not matter. They will be ours, and that is all that counts. Grasha pulled back to look at him, tears streaming down her face. I am so glad I found your well that night. So am I. They spent the rest of the evening making plans. They would need to expand the house, add another room for the baby. They would need more supplies, more food, more of everything. But Connor did not care about the work ahead. He was going to be a father. After years of grief and loss, life was giving him another chance. Spring came again, bringing warmth and new growth. Grasha's belly swelled, and she became more careful with her movements. Connor took over the heavier work, insisting she rest more. She argued at first but eventually agreed. One morning in late spring, Connor was plowing the field when he saw smoke rising from the direction of the house. Not the normal smoke from the chimney, but thick black smoke that spoke of fire. He dropped the plow handles and ran. The barn was on fire, flames licking up the sides and consuming the dry wood with terrifying speed. Connor could hear the goats screaming inside, trapped by the flames. He started toward the barn, but Grasha grabbed his arm. Do not, she said urgently. It is too dangerous. The animals are already dead. Look. Connor looked and saw she was right. The barn was fully engulfed now, the heat so intense he could feel it from 30 feet away. Whoever had set the fire had done it quickly and efficiently. Garrett, Connor said, his voice tight with rage. Probably. Grasha pulled him toward the house. Come on, we need to make sure the house is safe. They checked the house thoroughly, but there was no sign of fire. Whoever had done this had been content with destroying the barn. Connor fetched buckets of water from the well, but it was too late. By the time the flames died down, there was nothing left but smoldering timbers and ash. Connor stood looking at the ruins, his fists clenched. The goats were gone. The chickens that had roosted in the barn were gone. A season's worth of stored hay and grain was gone. Why? He asked. Why do this? Because they are petty and cruel, Grasha said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes blazed with fury. Because they cannot stand to see us happy. We should go to the town. Tell the constable. And what will he do? We have no proof it was Garrett, and even if we did, do you think anyone would punish a human for harassing an orc and her husband? Connor knew she was right, but it did not make the anger any easier to bear. They spent the day salvaging what they could from the ruins. There was not much. A few tools that had survived the heat, some metal fittings, nothing of real value. That evening, as they sat in the house, Connor made a decision. We are not letting them drive us away, he said. We will rebuild. better and stronger than before. Grasha looked at him. "Are you certain? It would be easier to move, to find somewhere far from here." "No, this is our home. We chose it, we built it, and we are not abandoning it because of cowards who fight with fire instead of facing us honestly." A slow smile spread across Grasha's face. "Then we rebuild." And they did. Connor rode to town and bought lumber, nails, and supplies. He asked Peter, his neighbor, for help, and the man agreed without hesitation. Other neighbors heard about the fire and came to offer assistance. Even Horace from the general store donated some materials. The new barn went up in 2 weeks, larger and sturdier than the old one. Connor built it with stone foundations and a tile roof that would not burn easily. They bought new animals to replace those they had lost. 2 goats, a handful of chickens, and a young cow that would provide milk. Garrett and his men did not return. Connor suspected that the show of community support had warned them off. Burning an empty barn was one thing. Attacking a man with friends and allies was another. Summer arrived, and with it, the birth of Connor and Grasha's child. The labor started in the middle of the night. Connor had been sleeping lightly, aware that Grasha's time was near. When she shook him awake, he jumped up and lit every lamp in the house. "What do you need?" he asked. "Water." "Towels?" "Both, and calm down. You are making me nervous." Connor forced himself to breathe slowly. He had assisted with animal births before, but this was different. This was his wife, his child. He brought water and towels and helped Grasha to the bed. The labor was long and difficult. Grasha bore it with stoic determination, only crying out when the pain became too much. Connor held her hand and whispered encouragement, feeling utterly helpless. Finally, as dawn broke, the baby arrived. Connor caught the tiny, wriggling form and held it up to the light. The baby was small, smaller than he had expected, with green-tinged skin and a tuft of dark hair. As he watched, the baby opened its mouth and wailed, a strong, healthy sound that made Connor's heart soar. "It is a girl," he said, laughing through tears. "Grasha, we have a daughter." Grasha held out her arms and Connor placed the baby in them. She looked down at the tiny face, and her expression transformed into something so tender that Connor felt his throat tighten. "Hello, little one," Grasha whispered. "Welcome to the world." They named her Mara after Connor's mother. She had green skin like her mother, but Connor's gray eyes and human features. Her ears were slightly pointed, and she had no tusks, though Connor suspected they might appear as she grew older. She was perfect. The first few weeks were exhausting. Mara needed constant attention, and both Connor and Grasha were new to being parents. But they learned quickly, supporting each other through the sleepless nights and the moments of panic when Mara would not stop crying. Slowly, they found their rhythm. Grasha would nurse Mara while Connor did the morning chores. Connor would watch Mara in the afternoon while Grasha tended the garden. They would take turns walking her around the house when she was fussy, singing soft songs and telling stories. When Mara was 2 months old, Connor brought her to town for the first time. He had been nervous about it, unsure how people would react to a half-orc baby. But the response surprised him. Helen, the older woman who had brought them apples, cooed over Mara and declared her beautiful. Horace gave Connor a little wooden rattle for the baby. Even people who had been cold before softened when they saw Mara's tiny face. "She looks like you," one woman said to Connor. "Same eyes." "She looks like both of us," Connor replied firmly, "and we could not be prouder." As the months passed, Mara grew strong and healthy. She had her mother's strength and her father's curiosity. She laughed easily and rarely cried. Watching her play on a blanket in the garden, reaching for butterflies and flowers, filled Connor with a joy he had thought lost forever. One evening in autumn, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Grasha leaned her head on Connor's shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Taking me in that night?" Connor looked at her in surprise. "Never, not for a single moment, even with everything that has happened. The hunters, the fire, the judgment, especially because of all that." Connor took her hand. "You and Mara are my family, my life. Everything I do for you, and I would not trade this for anything." Grasha smiled. "Good, because I feel the same way." They sat there as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Inside the house, Mara slept peacefully in her cradle. The farm was quiet, peaceful, whole. Connor thought back to that night a year and a half ago when he had heard footsteps at the well. The night when a desperate orc woman had asked him for water, and he had made the choice to help her. It had been the best decision of his life. Winter came again, and then spring. Mara took her first steps in the garden, laughing as she toddled between Connor and Grasha. They threw a small party for her first birthday, inviting Peter's family and Helen and a few other neighbors. The children played together while the adults talked and ate. It was not a large gathering, but it was genuine. These people had accepted them, accepted Mara, and that meant everything. As the years passed, Connor and Grasha built a life that was simple but rich. They expanded the farm, adding more fields and animals. They helped their neighbors and were helped in return. They raised Mara with love and taught her to be proud of who she was, both human and orc. Sometimes, late at night, Connor would think about the war, about Maggie and the life he had lost. The pain was still there, a dull ache that never fully went away. But it was bearable now, softened by new love and new purpose. He had been given a second chance, and he had taken it. He had built something good and true from the ashes of his old life. And every night, when he climbed into bed beside Grasha and listened to the soft sounds of Mara sleeping in the next room, he gave thanks for the footsteps he had heard at midnight. For the thirsty orc woman who had stood at his well and changed his life forever. One summer day, when Mara was 3 years old, Connor was working in the field when he saw a figure approaching down the road. He tensed, his hand going to the knife at his belt, until he recognized the person. It was a young orc man, tall and broad-shouldered, with the same green skin as Grasha. He walked with a slight limp and his clothes were worn. Connor met him at the edge of the property. "Can I help you?" The young orc stopped and looked at him warily. "I am looking for Grasha." "I heard she lived here." "She does. Who are you?" "My name is Crag. I am her cousin." Connor studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Wait here." He went to the house and found Grasha in the kitchen, kneading bread. "You have a visitor. Says he is your cousin." Grasha's eyes widened. "Crag." "He is here." "Yes." She wiped her hands and rushed outside. Connor followed, watching as she approached the young orc. For a moment they just stared at each other. Then Grasha pulled him into a fierce hug. "Crag, I thought you were dead." "I thought the same about you." Crag pulled back, his eyes shining with tears. "I have been looking for you for months. Someone in a town south of here said they had seen an orc woman living on a farm with a human. I did not dare hope it was you. It is me. I am here. I am safe." Crag looked past her at Connor. "Is this your human?" "This is Connor. My husband." Crag's expression shifted through several emotions: surprise, confusion, and finally acceptance. "Then I am glad to meet you, Connor. Any human who treats my cousin well is a friend of mine." Connor held out his hand, and after a moment, Crag shook it. "You are welcome here," Connor said. "Stay as long as you need." Crag stayed for 2 weeks. He told them about the orc clans in the mountains, how many had been scattered by hunters and human soldiers. How he had been searching for surviving family members, hoping to find some safe place where they could settle. "You are welcome to stay here," Grasha said. "We could use the help on the farm, and Mara should know her family." Crag looked tempted but shook his head. "I have others depending on me." A small group of orcs, mostly elderly and children, I need to find them a safe place. But thank you. It means more than you know." Before he left, Connor gave him supplies and directions to other farms in the area where he thought Crag might find help. "Not everyone will welcome you," Connor warned. "But some will. Look for the people who are kind. They exist." "I will. Thank you, Connor, for taking care of my cousin, for giving her a home." "She gave me a home too," Connor said simply. They said their goodbyes and Crag disappeared down the road. Connor hoped he would find what he was looking for. Years passed. Mara grew into a bright, curious child who loved animals and plants equally. She helped in the garden, fed the chickens, and asked endless questions about everything. She was neither fully human nor fully orc, but something new and wonderful. Other children came. A son named Derek with Connor's build and Grasha's green skin. A second daughter named Sarah who looked almost completely human except for her pointed ears. Each child was unique. Each child was loved. The farm prospered. Connor and Grasha's hard work paid off and they were able to buy more land, build a larger house, and live comfortably. They were respected in the community now, their children playing with human children without question. It was not perfect. There were still people who looked at them with distaste, who muttered about mixing races and unnatural unions. But there were far more who accepted them, who saw them as neighbors and friends. One evening, when Connor was in his 40s and Grasha was showing the first hints of gray in her dark hair, they sat together on the porch as they had done 1,000 times before. The children were asleep inside. The farm was quiet. "You remember the night we met?" Grasha asked. Connor smiled. "Every detail. You were standing at my well looking half dead from thirst. I was so afraid I thought you would drive me away or worse. I almost did, for about 2 seconds. Connor took her hand. "Then I saw your face and knew I could not. You were not a monster. You were just a person in need. You saved my life that night. And you saved mine. I was just existing before you came, breathing but not living. You gave me a reason to wake up in the morning, a reason to hope." Grasha leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Connor Lansing." "I love you too, Grasha Lansing." They sat there in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Inside the house, their children slept safely. Around them, the farm they had built together stretched out in peaceful prosperity. It had not been an easy path. There had been danger and fear and moments when Connor had wondered if they would survive. But they had. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting, and it had all started with footsteps at midnight and a simple request for water. Connor thought about that often in the years that followed, as his children grew and eventually brought families of their own to visit. As he and Grasha grew old together, working side by side until their hands were gnarled and their backs bent. He thought about it on the day Mara married a kind young man who loved her for exactly who she was. On the day Derek took over running the farm, strong and capable just like his mother. On the day Sarah left to become a teacher, determined to educate children of all races. And he thought about it on the quiet mornings when he would wake before dawn and go to the well, drawing water just as he had done that first night. Grasha would join him there sometimes, and they would stand together in the gray light, remembering. "Thank you," Grasha would say, "for that first drink of water." "Thank you for asking," Connor would reply. They lived long lives, Connor and Grasha, long enough to see their children have children, long enough to watch the world slowly, painfully begin to change. Interspecies marriages were still rare, but they were no longer unthinkable. Orcs and humans worked together more often, fought together less. It was not perfect. It might never be perfect, but it was better. And when Connor finally passed away, an old man surrounded by family, his last sight was of Grasha's face, still beautiful to him after 50 years. Still the woman who had stood at his well at midnight and changed everything. Grasha lived a few years longer, cared for by their children and grandchildren. She spent her days in the garden she had built, tending the plants and watching the world continue to grow and change. And sometimes, in the evening, she would walk to the old well in the yard. She would rest her hands on the stone rim and remember a desperate night so long ago when she had stumbled upon a small farm and a lonely man. She had been thirsty. He had given her water, and from that simple act of kindness, an entire life had bloomed. When Grasha passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by love, the family buried her beside Connor under the old oak tree. They planted flowers on the graves, the same kind that had grown in Grasha's garden for decades, and the farm continued. Derek and his family worked the land. The grandchildren played in the yard, and every year on the anniversary of that midnight meeting, the family would gather at the well. They would tell the story to the youngest children, making sure they understood. Once, a desperate woman had asked for water, and a man had given it freely, expecting nothing in return. From that small act of compassion, a family had grown. A home had been built. Lives had been changed forever. It was a simple story, but it was true, and it was enough.